My dreams is to become a successful singer and guitarist and performers music around the world.
Before Nene Royal ever walked onto that AGT stage, something happened that the cameras never showed you. Not the nerves, not the birthday. Something bigger, something that took years, and something the judges knew absolutely nothing about when they hit those 4 yeses. Because the shy, giggling teenager the world fell in love with that night was hiding a past. And inside the very song she chose sits a dark secret that almost nobody in that cheering crowd understood. Stay with me to the end, because once you know what really happened before that walk, you will never watch her audition the same way again. The famous audition, Tuesday, the 7th of July, 2026. That is the night the whole world suddenly learned her name. A 15-year-old girl from Phuket walked onto the season 21 stage of America's Got Talent looking like the last person on earth who could command a room. She was soft-spoken. She giggled at her own nerves. She told the judges that the very next day she would turn 16, and the entire studio ended up singing happy birthday to a kid who had flown halfway around the planet with her father standing quietly at the side of the stage, watching over her the way he always had. When the judges asked what she wanted from her life, she said she dreamed of becoming a superstar on tour. In that moment, honestly, she sounded like a child making a wish she did not fully believe would ever come true. The audience smiled the way you smile at any sweet kid on that stage. Nobody in the building had the slightest idea what was about to hit them. Then she picked up the electric guitar. That girl disappeared. What replaced her was a force. She tore into a rocked-up version of the Cranberries' classic Zombie, growling from somewhere deep in her chest, throwing her head back, pulling 3,000 strangers into the chorus like she had been doing this for 20 years. Heads at the judges' table snapped up. People began rising out of their seats before the final note had even faded, and the noise in that room swelled into a full standing ovation. Sofia Vergara told her the performance was spectacular and that she had a real chance to go far in the competition. Howie Mandel looked at her and declared her a rock star. No qualifiers, no maybe. Mel B, who mentioned that Phuket happens to be her favorite place on earth, praised her vocal control and said she could genuinely kill it on the guitar, calling the whole combination a match made in heaven. Even Simon Cowell, a man who has built an entire career out of crushing dreams, admitted that the tone of her voice felt completely authentic, and that the slightly messy edges were exactly what made the audition work. 4 yeses, a clip racing across the internet within hours, watched by millions of people who all believed they had just witnessed a miracle appear out of thin air. But here is the thing about miracles. Most of them are just years of invisible work that nobody bothered to film. And Nene Royal's invisible years happened in a place most of her new American fans could not find on a map. The night market years. So let's go back to that market, because the broadcast never showed you this part. And it is the part that changes how you hear everything else. That scene from the opening was not a one-time thing. It was her life. Weekend after weekend, deep into the night, Nene worked as a street performer in her own city, and not in some polished, made-for-television way. She played over the noise of sizzling walks, passing motorbikes, and tourists far more interested in flipping through racks of cheap souvenirs than in listening to a teenager sing. No spotlight, no introduction, no guarantee that a single soul would stop. Sit with what that actually feels like for a second, because most people never have to live it. You pour absolutely everything you have into a song, and the crowd walks straight past you as if you are a part of the furniture. Maybe 1 person out of 50 stops. They listen for half a chorus. Then they wander off toward the noodle stalls. There is a very specific kind of loneliness in performing for people who never chose to hear you. And there is a very specific kind of strength that grows out of surviving it year after year. Because when you learn to hold the attention of a crowd that has every reason to ignore you, a television studio packed with people who are already looking at you holds absolutely no fear at all. That was the secret weapon nobody at the judges' table knew she was carrying. The trembling girl they met before the song and the fearless performer who appeared during it were never 2 different people. They were the same person the entire time. Only one of those versions ever made it onto the broadcast. Quick pause before we go deeper, because the next part of this story is the piece almost nobody gets right. If you are enjoying this so far, Take 1 second and hit that subscribe button because we dig up the hidden stories behind moments like this every single week, and what is coming next is the reason you clicked. Her own fans back home had already given her a title that told the whole truth long before America caught on. Across her channels, she is known as the Angel of Rock, and her devoted followers run a fan page proudly named Phuket Rockstar. Her city adored her. Her country was watching her, which raises the question that makes this story almost impossible to believe. How does a kid get that good with no teacher, no music school, and not a single formal lesson of any kind? The self-taught prodigy. Because that is the truth of it. There was no expensive teacher, no conservatory, no famous mentor pulling strings behind the scenes. Nene taught herself to play entirely by ear, watching videos online and copying what she heard until her fingers finally obeyed her, through quiet, unglamorous repetition that nobody ever posts about. Her official story says she first held a guitar at 6 years old, though on the AGT stage she told the judges it was 7. Either way, she was gripping a fretboard at an age when most of us were still learning to tie our own shoes. One of her older channels still carries a description joking that her fingers move faster than light, and that watching her play even once can become an addiction. That is a bold thing for a channel to joke about itself, right up until the moment you actually hear her play. And here is something the zombie performance did not reveal. That song is not the ceiling of what she can do. It is barely a warm-up. She has torn through brutal guitar monsters like Deep Purple's Burn, the kind of solo that makes seasoned professionals stop scrolling and lean toward the screen in disbelief. Her range runs from delicate, aching melodies all the way to full-throttle rock, and that versatility is exactly why a real instrument company, Enya Music, chose her as a featured artist while she was still a schoolgirl. That is an endorsement plenty of grown professional musicians spend entire careers chasing and never earn. The proof of how deeply that talent connected is sitting right there in the numbers. Her following climbed past 800,000 people on Facebook alone and stretched beyond 3 million once you count every platform together. Those are not vanity figures. They are the sound of a global audience quietly gathering around a kid from a small island long before the mainstream ever looked her way. And she built all of it in private, alone in a room, learning from a phone screen, rewinding the same few seconds of video over and over until her hands caught up with her ears, with nobody promising her that any of it would ever pay off. Except it did pay off, far earlier than the internet realizes. Because back home in Thailand, that lonely practice had already turned into a shelf of honors that the judges on that famous night never got to hear a single word about. The hidden trophies. The narrative that spread online painted her as a magical unknown who appeared out of nowhere. It is a lovely story. It is also simply not true. Thailand had been watching this girl climb for years. On the 28th of October, 2023, she placed second at the Overdrive Guitar Contest, a competition so respected in the country that it carries its own nickname, the Guitar Battle, where the judges praised her for playing at a professional level while she was still just a child. Then, on the 27th of September, 2025, she was named an outstanding player at the King Power Band competition, another serious recognition of her as a live performer rather than a passing online novelty. She had also already stepped in front of television cameras on the well-known Thai program Super 10, sharing a stage with established professional artists at an age when most kids are too shy to sing at a family party. So, by the time she boarded that plane to the United States, she was not some wide-eyed beginner hoping for her first taste of a spotlight. She was a decorated, tested, quietly celebrated musician, carrying years of pressure and preparation that an entire audience mistook for beginner's luck. I think that gap between how the world saw her and who she actually was is the real heart of this story, and it is something so many of us feel in our own lives. You work in the shadows for years, you build something real that almost nobody notices. Then one loud moment finally arrives, and strangers act as if you were born on the day they discovered you. Nene wore that quiet frustration with more grace than most adults ever could. She let the music do the arguing for her, and on that July night, the argument was finally over. But there is one detail that even her biggest fans back home may not have fully understood, and it hides inside the very song she chose to sing. Because the anthem she carried onto that stage was born out of a real tragedy, and almost nobody in that cheering crowd had the faintest idea what it was truly about. The dark anthem. To understand why her choice is so haunting, you have to know where Zombie actually comes from, because it is one of the heaviest protest songs in modern music history. It was written by Dolores O'Riordan of the Irish band The Cranberries and released in 1994, and it was never written to entertain anybody. It was written in grief and fury after a real atrocity. On the 20th of March, 1993, the IRA hid 2 bombs inside cast iron litter bins in the English town of Warrington. When those bombs exploded, they killed 2 children, a 3-year-old boy named Jonathan Ball and a 12-year-old boy named Tim Perry, and wounded more than 50 other people. O'Riordan was a young woman out on tour when the news reached her, and the horror of it never let go. She poured her anger into a song that refused to accept violence as normal, and she made it painfully personal, insisting that this bloodshed was not being carried out in her name or in the name of ordinary Irish people. When strangers assumed she supported the paramilitaries simply because she was Irish, she pushed back hard, making it plain that they did not speak for her, and that her family had nothing to do with any of it. The song even reaches all the way back to 1916 and the Easter Rising, treating the violence as an old sickness that keeps repeating itself while children pay the price. Now, hold all of that heaviness in your mind and place it beside the scene we started with. A smiling teenager, one single day away from turning 16, stood on a glittering entertainment stage and threw her whole body into an anthem soaked in death, protest, and a mother's shattered heart. The vast majority of that clapping, cheering crowd had no idea they were hearing a cry against terrorism. They heard a hit song from the 90s. They did not hear the funeral inside it. Whether Nene fully carried the weight of every single word or simply felt its raw power in her bones, there is something quietly profound about a young voice from one side of the world, lifting up a young woman's protest from another. 2 teenagers, separated by decades, both refusing to stay silent. And here is where the timing turns almost eerie, because at the exact moment her version was spreading, the song's original creators were preparing to pull the very anthem back into the light. The song Reborn. Zombie has a strange habit of refusing to die. When Dolores O'Riordan passed away unexpectedly in 2018, many assumed the song would settle quietly into history. The opposite happened. Irish rugby crowds turned it into a stadium anthem, roared at major tournaments. Online, it crossed the staggering milestone of 1 billion streams and views, joining a tiny club of rock songs that keep finding new audiences decades after release. A thunderous cover by the band Bad Wolves carried it to millions of younger listeners who had never heard the original. And perhaps the most moving response of all came from Colin Perry, the father of 12-year-old Tim, one of the 2 boys killed in the Warrington bombing, who described the song as majestic and deeply truthful, saying it transformed unimaginable grief into remembrance instead of silence. Then, just as Nene's audition was exploding across social media and introducing millions of new people to that same song, the Cranberries announced the first official release of a previously unheard concert recording, a live album captured at the London Astoria in 1994, arriving on the 28th of August, with a live performance of Zombie among its highlights. Think about that collision for a second. On one side of the world, an Irish band preparing to share a restored performance from more than 3 decades ago. On the other, a teenage street musician from the night markets of Phuket, unknowingly reigniting global interest in the very same song at the very same moment. Different cultures, different generations, one piece of music binding them together, with Nene now the newest link in a chain that stretches all the way back to Dolores O'Riordan herself. But a perfect coincidence and a viral clip will only carry a 16-year-old so far. What happens after the applause fades is where her story truly gets decided, and that part is unfolding right now. What comes next? The audition was never meant to be the finish line, and she is treating it exactly that way. Those 4 yeses sent her through to the next round, and while the show has not revealed how far she will go, she is still very much in the running, one step closer to the touring superstar dream she whispered about on that stage. More importantly, she is not sitting around waiting for the internet to decide her fate. Away from the cameras, she has been writing and recording her own original material, preparing a debut EP expected to arrive this summer. That quietly marks her biggest evolution yet, the leap from a girl who plays other people's songs into an artist creating her own. It is the difference between borrowing a voice and finally using yours. Line the whole journey up, and it lands with real weight. A child taught herself guitar from a screen. She played for years to crowds that walked straight past her at a night market. She collected honors almost nobody outside Thailand ever heard about. Then she carried one of rock music's most serious protest songs onto a world stage, with her father watching proudly from the wings, exactly the way he had watched her 1,000 times before in far humbler places. The trembling, shy girl and the fearless angel of rock were never two different people. They were one story the whole time, and that story is nowhere near finished. If you had told the little girl busking over the roar of motorbikes that 4 global icons would one day rise to their feet for her, she might not have believed you. That is exactly why this story deserves to be followed all the way to wherever it goes next. So make sure you are subscribed, because we will be tracking every step of her journey right here. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think Nene Royal has what it takes to win the entire competition? Or is her biggest moment still hiding somewhere ahead of her? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below, because I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know where you stand.